Welcome back to Pro Wrestling Throwdown for the week of January 16th, 2021. I'm Caleb Black. This is Luke the Big Dog Williams. We're here with our in-studio producer, the mighty Max Fury, and it's time for Top 5. Today's Top 5 is most underrated wrestlers. Now, we're going to go...
if we were more... as we get along here and we start getting more in-depth videos, I just want like a big hand and they go, 5!
Yeah, absolutely, some graphics. So, obviously, people are going to have comments and things about this. Like we've said before, this is the first video we're doing like this. We will absolutely follow up with more, top 5 underrated too. These are just the ones we're throwing off the top of our head talking about it. You can dig back to the 50s and find underrated wrestlers. Obviously, you're going to get a lot of newer names here. Some of the older names, don't worry, we're not passing anybody up. We're just shooting this from the hip. Luke, why don't you start us off? Who's your number 5? Top 5
number
most
5.
underrated wrestlers.
Honestly, I think someone who was talented in professional wrestling before they made it to the E. Mm-hmm. Shane Helms,
Agreed.
the Hurricane. The Hurricane, at one point with his stretch with The Rock, if they would have capitalized, you could have put the title on the Hurricane and had a program with him and The Rock, and it would have been believable. I
agree, and I think, too, on that note, if you look back, obviously Shane Helms was one of the workhorses for Velocity, for SmackDown, especially. Nitro, I mean, who could forget 3 Count? I love 3 Count.
Well, I'm talking about Sugar Shane.
Yeah.
When he went on his own and started using the vertebraker and the super kick, he was on his way. And to think of the Hurricane, you think of all the good things that you can remember from the segments with the Hurricane. You realize that the highest title that the Hurricane ever held in WWE was the light heavyweight championship and the tag title.
The cruiserweight champion.
That was the light heavyweight. But the tag titles were the only mainstream title that he held. He never held one of the single top tier titles.
And he most certainly could have been a great Intercontinental champion.
For sure, European champion.
Yeah.
For sure, but
100%.
He never held them.
I completely agree. My top 5 is going to dig back a little bit. Ron Simmons. Now, this is WWF, WWE era Ron Simmons.
So Farouk.
Farouk.
Yeah.
Completely forgetting the fact that Farouk was a former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, was the first African-American singles World's Heavyweight Champion. Coming into the WWF, he could have been a main star at a top athletic level. Not to mention, and the stories about just how ridiculously, weirdly strong he was for a guy who could walk into a gym after not going for 6 months and bench press 500 pounds like it was nothing.
For sure.
And we're talking about the era in the 90s, especially with the Nation of Domination, where he could have led the nation and had been taken like a very serious turn to being a top African-American talent, and they just never did it with him. And then obviously, I love the Acolytes. Hard-hitting, brilliant tag team.
One of the better tag teams.
And
with or without the titles.
Right, and I always thought, too, what a great buffer for JBL as world champion on SmackDown would Farouk have been.
Giant misstep.
Yeah, agreed.
Should have taken
and the storyline, I've booked it in my head a million times. JBL, leaves the Acolytes, goes on to become world champion. Just think about Farouk coming down the ring one day, but like, you wouldn't be world champion if it wasn't for me. You would never have been world champion if it wasn't for the Acolytes, for everything I did, damn. And they get into a fight, and by God, have JBL drop the belt to Farouk.
Right.
For a short, limited run as world champion, would have just made so much money. For that reason, Ron Simmons on my number 5.
Okay, I'm going to go number 4, and this is going to be controversial.
Let's hear it.
Because of the status he has now.
Okay.
WWE.
Sure.
Cody Rhodes.
I agree. 100%.
Cody Rhodes in the WWE at one point could have, when the legacy thing broke away and Randy Orton and them turned on each other, they turned on Randy and all that, should have been a main level feud between Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton for the championship.
I completely agree. And if you think, too, if the WWE would have used Cody Rhodes properly, there would be no AEW.
No.
Because Cody was among the brain trust that started it.
Yeah.
And thinking, too, like how talented and traveled Cody is now, where he could be if he'd stayed in it. Like, if he had his ability now, if he'd have stayed in the WWE, the kind of feud that you could see from a fully grown adult Cody Rhodes
for sure,
and the Randy Orton of today,
for sure,
just printed money. That's a great call.
For sure.
That's a great call. My number 4 is also going to be a little controversial considering who he is today, but allow me to explain it. Marty Jannetty. Marty Jannetty, while having lost his mind now, in the 90s, for the WWF, there's a reason, tag teams are referred to as the Jannetty. because of Shawn Michaels' success. But same story. Shawn Michaels, after the breakup of the tag team, goes on to drop the Intercontinental title to Marty Jannetty, and actually, that match they had on Raw was the match of the year in 1996.
The only unfortunate part of that is that Jannetty only got to carry the title for a week.
Yeah.
Not because of talent. See, that's what a lot of people forget is they think it was because he wasn't talented. It was because his personal life and his personal demons what cost him a main level run. But yes, you are correct.
And thing too, same story. Michaels gets the world title. Jannetty would have stayed in, been healthy, been in shape. 96, Jannetty versus Michaels for the world title, or even in 2004, or 2005 when Jannetty made his return.
Yes.
Had another chance, and obviously, like you said.
Well, and if you watch that match with Kurt Angle that he had, it was fantastic.
Fantastic. And also, if you go back on your Rolodex, at that time, Jannetty held out tapping from the ankle lock longer than anybody else had up to that point.
Also, I want you to go back and I want you to watch the What If Scott Steiner video.
Yes.
That we did because I actually bring up the fact of Marty Jannetty would have challenged Michaels in the steel cage for the IC title in Mania 9.
I think we should let people know, because I know we have a lot of young viewers.
Yeah.
A Rolodex internet.
Right. Yeah, Rolodex. But yeah, Marty Jannetty.
My number 4, Marty Jannetty.
Great call. My number 3, gosh, there's so many. I hate the fact that I'm going to leave out numerous people
again,
in this video.
Yeah, we're going to revisit. Don't worry.
I'm going to go with, honestly, Santino Marella. I think could have been... Now, hold on.
I know. No, I agree.
During the height of his popularity and the fact that he was a legitimate shooter.
Yeah.
If given the right... I always said he should have come out and he should have dropped the goofy gimmick and been like, you people wanted to laugh.
Right.
I gave you that. I gave you the funny. And this is how you repay me. And then could have went legitimate shooter. The year Alberto Del Rio, we go back to this every time, won the Royal Rumble. The pop from the crowd when they realized Santino was still in the Rumble.
Yeah, was huge.
And then the Elimination Chamber after that was huge.
Agreed. And actually, you probably could have revisited that and seen it almost as though they were going to push Marella. I remember, so very early on, you remember they started first doing the Raw versus SmackDown matches when Marella was the Intercontinental Champion. After he beat Umaga with the assistance of Bobby Lashley, he wrestled the U.S. Champion, who was on SmackDown at the time, and for some reason, I don't remember who it was, but I remember watching it with you, and this was like 15 years ago, but I remember commenting on the side kicks he was throwing to the guy's hips, and I was like, man, those are like really solid kicks, and at that point, we hadn't seen a lot of like really competitive in-ring work, but that initial run from 05 to 06 where he was just wrestling. I want to
say that was MVP that was the champion.
You know what? I think you might be right.
I could be mistaken, but I think that's about the right time frame.
But either way, like just getting to watch him be a technical wrestler,
for sure,
was phenomenal. Speaking of technical wrestlers, my number 3, William Regal. William Regal should have been world champion. I don't care what you say about his size. I don't care what you say about his look. I don't care what you say about his controversies. William Regal should have been world champion, and William Regal today could stretch any member of the NXT roster.
My number 2, because there's no arguing that. My number 2, again, in my opinion, very underutilized, very underrated. Shelton Benjamin.
I could talk all day long about how poorly used Shelton Benjamin is.
In the original stretch, when he beat Triple H on Raw, they should have snowballed that and capitalized. But, and I apologize ahead of time. This is probably going to be very controversial, what I'm about to say.
Go for it.
Shelton Benjamin was the wrong color.
At the time,
At the time, he was the wrong color. African Americans did not get the pushes that they deserved.
No.
Unless they were A, Samoan. Or B, come in from WCW.
Yeah.
Because in the E, that didn't happen.
There was such an admonishing lack.
As a matter of fact, you couldn't break the Intercontinental title in most cases.
Which Shelton managed to do.
But he did. He also broke down glass ceiling. Tag team specialist, Intercontinental champion, United States champion.
I think, too, his transition from SmackDown after having left the World's Greatest Tag Team beat Triple H. They put him over clean on Triple H 3 weeks in a row. in his debut on Raw, was involved in the hottest storylines of that year with Raw versus Evolution, with Shelton Benjamin and Randy Orton for the Intercontinental titles, Shelton Benjamin and Chris Jericho. The thing that stopped Shelton, outside of the race example, which is a very good point, was one botch on TV.
Yep.
When Carlito made his Raw debut, the same way Carlito made his SmackDown debut and beat John Cena for the U.S. title, he beat Shelton Benjamin for the Intercontinental title. Benjamin went for his plancha, which he'd always had, done a million times on TV, tripped on a rope, and because it botched, Vince immediately pulls his push. And the fucked up part was he was dropping the Intercontinental title to go on to become number one contender for the world title.
Yep.
And it's never been said they were going to put the belt on him, but they should have.
Also, you want if you need more proof of Shelton Benjamin, just watch him and Michaels.
Yep.
In the Gold Rush.
One of the best matches.
One of the most captured finishes of any professional wrestling match in the last
I've used it
20 years. The super kick out of the springboard.
Yep.
Enough said.
Yep. My number 2, Raven. WWF Raven, and even really WCW Raven. Raven was ECW World Champ. Mm-hmm. Went on to WCW to become United States Champion, and they never put the belt on him, even though he was the leader of the flock. Even though he'd been involved in high-profile feuds, never gets the belt. Now, mind you, at this period of time, Raven was having some substance abuse issues with pain pills. When he leaves WCW, when WCW closes, before he goes to the WWF, Raven's clean. Not only is he clean, but he's in the best shape of his life. And everyone always talks about how brilliant Raven is mentally, and no one ever really fully explores that. With his charisma, his affability, and that gimmick, going into the pop he gets when he came in for his Raw debut and DDT'd, was it Flair?
Yeah.
Or somebody. The pop he gets alone, Raven should have been a main player in the WWF, and instead gets relegated to being a fucking hardcore title competitor. Of course, then he goes on to TNA, helps TNA out quite a bit, puts CM Punk on the fucking map during their feud from Ring of Honor. So, hindsight 2020, I guess, but Raven, underrated as shit, my number 2.
My number 1, since we're running short on time, I'll try to make it short and sweet, Xavier Woods. Xavier Woods, with all of his media outlets,
agreed,
outside of professional wrestling. I'm not saying world title push, it's continental title push.
Yeah.
United States title push. Something that could resonate with someone with his charisma.
Yeah.
And his talking ability. When the New Day started, they should have been the militant faction that they were supposed to be. It should have been the new version of the Nation of Domination. Of course, they took it. They went a different way with it. But in my opinion, Xavier Woods, underrated as shit.
I agree. And for my number 1, I'm going to say Jay Lethal. While a world champion in Ring of Honor, that's great. But Jay Lethal is a WWE quality caliber talent and could be world champion in the WWE. The fact that WWE didn't swoop on him whenever they had the opportunity is insane.
Yes.
Even if they tried, they should have offered more money. And Jay Lethal, again, pushed at the absolute top level at Ring of Honor. And fortunately, with this collective coming, I hope we get to see him on a more mainstream level with AEW and things. But Jay Lethal, number 1 most underrated wrestler in the business today. And guys, that's going to wrap us up for Top 5. Let us know what you think of our picks. Like I said, don't forget, there's going to be plenty more where that comes from. Leave a comment down below. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ProWrestlingThrowdown. Follow us on Twitter at ProWrestlingTD. Send us an email at ProWrestlingThrowdown@gmail.com. Stay tuned. We got more videos coming your way.